You ever see a 700-pound bear, a burning barn, and a suburban woman in high heels screaming about bylaws all in the same afternoon? I have. And I still ain't sure which one was the real predator. My name's Noah Jacobs. I live on a 16-acre ranch in Texas, passed down from my grandfather. I raise my own food, rescue wildlife, and mind my damn business. But last summer, a blonde named Karen from the new HOA next door decided my barn was her business, and my bear was a code violation. That's when things got ugly. She broke into my barn, got herself locked in a basement with Hank, a fully legal, fully grown grizzly rescue I'd raised since he was a cub. And if you think that was the end of it, buckle up. Because that scream she let out, it wasn't the last one. This isn't just a story about a bear. It's about land, lies, and how far some people will go to control what doesn't belong to them. So if you care about freedom, property rights, and what happens when the wrong cowboy gets pushed too far, like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Because trust me, this one's just getting started. The Grizzly Secret. When peace comes with claws. You ever keep a secret so big, so out there, it feels like you're carrying a live thunderstorm under your hat? Yeah, mine has claws, and weighs 700 pounds, and snores like a diesel engine. His name's Hank. And no, he's not a dog. He's a bear, a full-grown, legally registered grizzly who lives beneath my barn in a custom-built rescue enclosure, safe, secure, and far from the HOA's idea of aesthetic harmony. Let me back up a second. I'm Noah Jacobs, 41 years old, retired forest ranger, full-time rancher, and part-time amateur mechanic, with a deep respect for three things: peace and quiet, land you work with your hands, and never getting in a man's way before he's had his coffee. I live out here in rural Texas on 16 acres of bloodline dirt my grandfather fenced by hand in '62. This place? It's everything to me. It's not just home. It's a line in the sand. And that peace? I fought for it. So when I found Hank as a cub, mud-caked, half-starved, washed down river after a spring flood, I didn't call the game warden. I called the vet, the rescue center, the wildlife board. Followed every rule, every permit, every inch of red tape. Because if I was going to raise a grizzly, I was going to do it legal, safe, and with the kind of quiet dignity this world forgot. And let me tell you, Hank's not just a bear. He's my shadow. He watches the sunset with me, eats out of a reinforced trough like a polite monster, loves cantaloupe more than honey. And when I talk to him after a long day, he listens like I'm reading him scripture. You wouldn't believe how many nights that bear helped me feel like the world made sense again. But here's the thing about secrets. They don't stay buried, no matter how deep you build the barn. Not when you've got a new HOA sprouting up next door. And not when its queen bee thinks peace is a violation and curiosity's a permit away from trespassing. You'd think the HOA wouldn't care about a quiet old barn tucked on land they don't even own. But then again, you've never met Karen Monroe when the HOA crosses the fence. You know that feeling when someone walks into your home and starts rearranging your furniture without asking? That's what it felt like the first time Karen Monroe stepped onto my land, clipboard in one hand, superiority in the other. She wasn't subtle. He didn't knock, didn't wave, just strolled up to my front gate wearing high heels and cattle dust and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire monthly feed bill. "Mr. Jacobs," she said, squinting like I was too bright to look at. "We need to discuss your signage." Now mind you, the sign she was pointing at was barely bigger than a mailbox flap. It said, "Private property, no trespassing, plain, respectful, legally sound." But to her, it was apparently offensive to the vision of community cohesion she had for Sunset Valley Estates. I sipped my coffee and said, "Ma'am, this is not your community. This is a working ranch." Her smile tightened like someone pulling dental floss too hard. "Mr. Jacobs, our HOA has standards. We can't allow disruptive elements, visual or otherwise, to lower the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood. People drive past your property." I raised an eyebrow. And they see, well, This. She gestured vaguely to my hay bales, feed sacks, windmill, solar panels, and the American flag flapping proudly over my porch. I wanted to laugh. I really did. Instead, I said, "This land's been here since before your subdivision had sewer lines, ma'am. My grandfather fenced this property with his own hands. The only thing disrupting peace around here is the sound of you talking about it." That was the first shot fired. And the war started with letters. Sticky notes on the gate, anonymous complaints to animal control, petty calls about my unapproved fencing, and non-compliant mailbox color. Mind you, I don't have an HOA-approved mailbox. Because I don't have an HOA. My land's zoned independent, always has been. But that didn't stop her. She kept showing up, uninvited, unbothered, untouchable. Like she thought the laws of Texas bowed to HOA bylaws just because she printed them on fancy paper and highlighted them in pink. And then one day, she started pointing at my barn. "Is that structure up to code?" she asked. I crossed my arms. "It's been standing longer than you've been drawing breath, Karen." "Oh, I'll find out," she promised. And I believed her. Not because she was right, but because she was relentless. The type who wouldn't stop until she had dirt on you, even if she had to invent it herself. Thing is, she didn't know what was inside that barn. Not yet. But one summer morning, just past dawn, with the dew still on the fence line and the sky turning orange behind the hills, she decided to find out for herself. And let's just say, she picked the wrong day to go snooping. Bear in the basement, when boundaries get mauled. It was the scream that did it. That sharp, high-pitched suburban shriek that slices clean through the Texas heat and makes your stomach knot before your brain even catches up. I was halfway through mucking the stalls, sweat dripping off my brow, when it hit me like a gunshot echoing off the hills. The scream was coming from the barn. The barn. Hank's barn. I dropped my pitchfork. Boots hit the dirt like thunder. I sprinted across the pasture so fast I nearly tripped over the irrigation hose. And then I saw her. There she was, Karen Monroe, halfway down the staircase into the cellar below the barn. Hair frazzled, heels caked in mud, phone in hand like she was filming for some HOA episode of Dateline, Animal Control Edition. The problem? At the bottom of those stairs stood Hank, my 700-pound grizzly bear. He wasn't roaring, not yet, but he was awake, standing tall on his hind legs and letting out that low, rolling growl that sounds like thunder buried underground. Now look, Hank isn't some wild monster. He's a rescue, raised with care, temperament monitored by a team of wildlife professionals. He's rehabilitated, licensed, and legally housed. But he doesn't like strangers, especially not the kind who break padlocks, trespass uninvited, and scream directly in his face. "Don't move," I yelled from across the field. "Do not move." Karen spun around, face ghost white. "There's a bear down here." "Yes, Karen, there is. Because you broke into a barn clearly marked no trespassing and decided that your curiosity was more important than my warnings or basic common sense." Her phone slipped from her hand and tumbled down the stairs, landing a foot from Hank's paws. He looked at it like it owed him money. Then, clank. The cellar latch fell shut behind her. Karen was now locked in the barn. With Hank, I reached the barn door seconds later, heart slamming in my chest. "Hank, easy boy, back up," I called out, yanking at the latch. Inside, Karen had frozen, both hands in the air like she was being held up at the world's weirdest rodeo. "I'm going to sue you," she screamed. "You can't keep wild animals in a residential—" "Oh my God, he's coming closer." "No sudden moves," I shouted. "Don't stomp, don't yell." So what does she do? She stomps and yells. Hank, bless him, just huffed and took one slow step forward, enough to make Karen shriek again and backpedal so fast she nearly fell into a pile of hay. Finally, I managed to jimmy the latch and swing the door open. I descended the steps slowly, hands raised to calm Hank, who was now visibly annoyed and mildly confused. "Back, bud. She's just a mistake in a pantsuit." Once he settled down, Karen shot up those stairs like she was escaping a haunted house. She burst into the sunlight, shoes ruined, dignity shredded, and face locked in full suburban rage mode. "You're done, Mr. Jacobs. I'm calling the county, the state, CNN. You endangered me. I could have died." I crossed my arms. On my land, in a locked building, clearly marked, after being told to stay away. She stormed off, red-faced and flailing, climbed into her Lexus like it was a getaway car, and peeled off in a cloud of dust and entitlement. I looked down at Hank, who had already curled up on his rubber mat and was snoring again. "Good boy," I muttered. I'd growl too if she screamed in my face. Now, you'd think that little brush with Pa's in reality would have humbled her, taught her a lesson about respecting boundaries. But Karen? Karen doesn't learn. Karen retaliates. And the next morning, my driveway was crawling with flashing lights, animal control trucks, and a sheriff's cruiser. Because if she couldn't shut me down with fear, she was sure as hell gonna try with the law. From paper cuts to arson, how HOA turned into organized aggression. I've faced down wild coyotes. I've helped fight brush fires in the hills. But nothing prepared me for the bureaucratic wildfire known as Karen Monroe, armed with legal stationery. The day after the bear in the basement fiasco, I woke up to a cease and desist letter duct taped to my fence post. Literally duct taped. Classy. The letter, stamped with the Sunset Valley HOA logo, accused me of maintaining an unauthorized wildlife operation, endangering neighboring property values, and the kicker? Creating a community panic event involving an unregistered apex predator. It was signed in bright blue ink. Karen Monroe, HOA president. Underlined twice, because of course, I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Community panic event? Lady, you broke into my barn and filmed yourself screaming like a goat on TikTok. The only apex predator in that scene was your ego. I sent the letter straight to my lawyer, along with security footage, wildlife permits, and a time-stamped vet record showing Hank had all his shots and then some. Case closed, I figured. But Karen wasn't looking for justice. She was looking for vengeance. And that's when the paper cuts started bleeding. First, it was the mailbox. Smashed, twice, in 1 week. I replaced it with a metal one so tough it could have survived a car crash. Next, my garbage can was tagged for being visible from the road, even though it was behind a tree and technically on trash pickup day. Then came the real punch, an anonymous complaint about dangerous animal conditions. Knock from animal control at 6 a.m., 2 trucks, 3 agents, and a clipboard-carrying lady with an expression so tight you could play banjo off it. They asked to see Hank. I showed them Hank. He was peacefully napping with a watermelon between his paws, like a giant hairy toddler on a picnic. They left, embarrassed but polite. Karen, on the other hand, stood across the road grinning like she'd just won the lottery. But what she didn't realize is that she'd poked a man who had been through worse. I didn't flinch, I fortified. I upgraded locks, added trail cameras, installed motion sensors around the barn, and reinforced every door with industrial-grade hardware. Then came Friday. Hot, still air. Buzzards circling. You could smell the tension in the wind. I was heading back from a supply run when I noticed something strange. 2 sets of tire tracks leading straight to the barn. Fresh, not mine. I dropped the feed bags and ran. The barn latch was open. The basement door? Wide open. And Hank? Go. Then I heard it. Soft groaning. I rushed down the stairs. There he was, sedated, barely conscious, inside a steel-trap cage like some backwoods poacher's prize. And next to him, a man in an HOA polo shirt holding a tranquilizer pole and a clipboard. He turned white when he saw me. "Well, sir, this is..." A scheduled wildlife retrieval, he stammered. Scheduled by WHO, I barked. Then boom. The barn's main doors slammed shut. A pop. Then smoke. Then flames. Someone had set the barn on fire while we were inside. Let me repeat that. They set my barn on fire with a bear and 2 people inside. That's not HOA. That's organized aggression. And suddenly, Karen Monroe wasn't just a nuisance with a clipboard. He was a criminal with a plan. We barely made it out. I found the old storm tunnel from the basement, shoved Hank's cage through while the smoke rolled down like the hand of the devil. We escaped coughing, soaked in sweat, eyes burning. And standing in the tree line? Karen, wearing sunglasses, holding a remote, smirking. She didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. That night, I sat on my porch beside Hank, still recovering, and stared at the smoldering ruins of my barn. I wasn't angry. I was focused. Because fire has a way of revealing things. Weak spots, lies, intentions. And Karen Monroe had just left her signature in smoke. Now it was time to return the favor with truth, cameras, and the law. The fake deed, how a developer stole land with a pen. You ever felt your stomach drop without moving an inch? It did, standing in a dusty government office, holding a zoning map that claimed 2 acres of my land no longer belonged to me. 2 acres? Gone. Just poof. Like someone had waved a magic wand and erased part of my ranch from existence. Only it wasn't magic. It was fraud. Looks like a quitclaim deed was filed back in March, the county clerk said, casually flipping her screen toward me like she was showing me the lunch menu. Sold for $10, she added. To who? I asked, my voice already boiling under the surface. Sunset Valley Development Group, she replied, frowning. My hands curled tight around the printout. I never signed a quitclaim deed. I never sold a square inch. But somehow, on paper, they'd made it look like I handed it over for the price of a gas station sandwich. Let me be real clear for anyone not familiar with land law. A quitclaim deed is the real estate equivalent of someone scribbling "I give up" on a napkin and handing it to a notary. It's fast, it's quiet, and in the wrong hands, it's dangerous. Back at the ranch, the scene was worse. Bulldozers, Serbi flags, guys in hard hats acting like they owned the place. I rolled in, slammed the truck door, and marched straight up to the foreman. You're trespassing, I said. He didn't blink. We got permits, he muttered, pointing at a clipboard. I snatched the paper from his hand. Sure enough, there it was. My name on a quitclaim deed I'd never seen before. The signature a pathetic loop meant to look official. That's when he showed up. Black SUV. Cufflinks. Hair slicked back like he just stepped off a villain casting call. Mr. Jacobs, he said smoothly. Richard Knox, Sunset Valley's legal counsel. Let's talk. I didn't shake his hand. I didn't smile. He leaned in like he owned the air around us. You're standing in the way of progress. There's a bigger vision here. You forged a deed, I growled. You'll never prove that, he shrugged, and by the time you try, that road will be paved. Now, I've had enough fights in my life to know when someone's bluffing. This man wasn't bluffing. He was betting on time, on silence, on me giving up. But what he didn't know? I'd already called Ellie. And Ellie doesn't bluff either. Back at the ranch, we tore through the old files like bloodhounds. Deeds, tax records, granddad's letters. Then, at 2:17 a.m., we hit gold. The original deed. Signed, notarized, recorded, stating clearly that the boundary acres were part of the family trust, irrevocable and protected. Ellie held it up like it was a trophy. We got him. The next morning, we walked into the courthouse with coffee in one hand and an injunction in the other. But before we could file, Ramirez called. Karen's out on bail, she said. And guess who signed that fake deed? I already knew. Let me guess, I said. Alan Doyle, Karen's lawyer, now also Richard Knox's legal partner. Yep, Ramirez confirmed. And get this, he's under federal investigation for title fraud. You're not his first rodeo. It was all connected. Karen, Knox, Doyle, and someone higher still. Ellie's research traced the holding company back to Michael Lane, Karen's ex-husband and a millionaire developer with a history of land grabs masked as improvement plan. They weren't just stealing acres. They were building an empire, one fake signature at a time. That night, we found the final insult. A trail cam hidden in a tree facing my bedroom window. And taped to it? A note. You shouldn't have spoken. They could forge my name, torch my barn, even try to steal my bear. But now, they were watching my home. And they just crossed the final line. You ready for what comes next? Because I wasn't. But Ellie was. And what we caught on camera next changed everything. Bear trap becomes legal trap the moment power falls apart. They thought the trap was for Hank. Turns out it was for them. They ever watch someone get so comfortable in their own power that they forget the rules don't bend forever? That was Karen. That was Richard Knox. That was everyone who thought they could weaponize law, burn barns, forge deeds, and walk away clean. But here's the thing about power. Once you start swinging it around like a wrecking ball, eventually you hit something real. And that's exactly what happened. It started with a box. Not a big one, just a nondescript gray rectangle that Ellie and I pulled out of the woods behind the barn. We'd been tracking the trail cam feed they thought was theirs. Spoiler, it wasn't. See, after the forged deed stunt, Ellie decided to feed them a little something special, a fake feed. We looped footage of Hank snoozing in his enclosure, added a few motion triggers, and made it look like we were being reckless. Unsecured bear, wide open space, juicy lawsuit waiting to happen. They bought it. We caught the first guy on night cam, face hidden, gloves on, trying to sneak back to the barn ruins. He wasn't from the HOA. He was a contractor hired by Knox. And he brought the same cage they used before, tagged with a fresh serial number and no official paperwork. But this time, we were ready. Ellie tripped the sensor that activated our hidden perimeter grid. Flashbang. Motion spotlight. Two-way speaker. Smile for the sheriff, Ellie's voice said calmly through the speaker. He ran. We let him. Because what came next wasn't about catching one guy. It was about building a net tight enough to pull down the entire operation. We turned the footage over to Ramirez. She brought in the feds. Turns out that contractor worked for a private security firm funded by Sunset Valley Development's shadow account. The same account tied to Richard Knox. The same account that paid the lawyer who filed the fake deed. The same account that made a donation to a zoning board official 3 weeks before the annexation vote. It unraveled fast. And once it started, it didn't stop. Richard Knox was caught signing off on 3 illegal land seizures across county lines. Karen Monroe, she violated her bail agreement by participating in the trap operation and had coordinated payments to multiple false witnesses in the fire investigation. Alan Doyle, their lawyer, had a history of creative paperwork dating back 5 years, now all under investigation by a federal fraud unit. Michael Lane, the ex-husband turned shadow mogul? Turns out his name was tied to 6 different shell corporations buying up ranch land across Texas using forged quitclaim deeds. The sheriff showed up at my ranch personally to deliver the news. They're done, she said, smiling for the first time in weeks. You buried them with receipts. That week, 3 federal warrants were issued. Knox was perp-walked outside his Houston office by 2 agents in Navy windbreakers. Karen was arrested again, this time on live TV, her heels sinking into the courthouse lawn as she screamed about conspiracies and property rights. And the moment that sealed it, the court reinstated my original land deed in full, plus damages for fraud and arson. The state even offered to permanently protect the land as part of a wildlife trust in my family name. But the best part? The cage. That same steel trap they used for Hank? We submitted it as Exhibit A in the federal indictment. Turns out, they bought it using misappropriated HOA funds listed as garden fence upgrade. When the judge read that aloud in court, someone in the back snorted. Poetic justice smells a lot like burnt rope and cold metal. But if you thought that was the end, think again. Because just when I started sleeping again, a new bulldozer rolled out. A new name. A new threat. And this time, they weren't using a pen. They were using a private army, the HOA Hydra, how corruption runs deeper than fences. You ever hear the phrase, cut off one head, two more grow back? That's what it felt like. We'd taken down Karen, we'd cut off Knox, we'd watched the legal paperwork bleed red ink into federal courtrooms. But just when the dust started to settle, a new name popped up in the shadows, Crescent Horizon Holdings. I'd never heard of them. But they had. They'd bought out 3 parcels to the west of my ranch in less than a week. No signs, no visits, just paperwork and quiet drilling sounds in the early mornings. That's when Ellie leaned across the kitchen table, eyes sharp above her coffee. "This ain't about land anymore," she said. "It's about control." See, we thought Karen was the villain. Turns out she was just a pawn in a game of chess played by people who wear suits in boardrooms and buy counties like Monopoly squares. Crescent Horizon was owned by a trust. That trust was owned by another shell company. And that shell was linked to a man named Victor Dalmore. Victor didn't do HOA meetings. He hosted fundraisers for state senators. He donated to wildlife conservation groups while quietly bulldozing old pastures for luxury cabins. And he had recently hired the exact same security firm that had trespassed on my land. We dug deeper. Turns out, Victor was part of a coalition. Not a conspiracy, not officially, but a network of developers, legal operatives, and real estate investors who worked together under one unifying mission: replace rural independence with HOA control. They used the same playbook: buy land near ranchers, form an HOA, weaponize code violations, push for annexation, split the land for profit. Sunset Valley, just one of many. Ellie leaned back one night, boots on the porch rail. "Hydra," she said. "That's what it is. HOA Hydra." And the crazy part? They didn't hide it that well. Their biggest mistake? Thinking folks like me don't read legal filings or know how to pull property records. We found that Victor had filed an infrastructure expansion initiative with the county planning board. A fancy way of saying, we want to build a road through Noah's land. Again, except this time, they weren't using Karen. They were using a city council member's cousin. They showed up with drones, surveyors, and get this, a marketing team. "Just gauging interest," one of them said as he stood on the ridge behind my barn with aviators and a brochure for Crescent Ridge Estates. Texas Serenity Reimagined. Ellie didn't even speak. She just handed me the bolt cutters. 2 hours later, their equipment was back on the flat. We weren't playing nice anymore. That night, we filed a civil injunction, backed by the Wildlife Trust, conservation groups, and about 600,000 people online who now followed Hank's story like it was a Netflix series. We also launched a Freedom of Information request on every council member who voted yes on the last zoning map update. Turns out, Victor's network had touched more than land. We touched schools, roads, emergency services, even sheriff department donations. But they made one mistake. They forgot something simple. This isn't just dirt. It's legacy. It's sweat and blood and bad coffee mornings and bare breath in the sunrise. It's mine. You want to know how we fought back? Really fought back? It wasn't just cameras or lawyers or viral clips. It was something older, something stronger. It was neighbors. It was story. And it was one bear that refused to be taken. The ranch that roared, turning land into legacy. You'd think when the court ruled in my favor and the final deed was cleared, I'd throw a party. But I didn't. I just sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, boots kicked up, Hank snoring beside me, and Ellie humming off tune to some old Willie Nelson track on the radio. Because see, it wasn't just about winning. It was about surviving with soul intact. It was about showing the country that land ain't just dirt, it's identity, that peace isn't weakness, and that you can push a rancher so far, but if he's got a bear, a backbone, and the truth on his side, well, you best back the hell off. In the months after the HOA collapsed and Victor Dalmore was indicted on multiple counts of fraud, bribery, and racketeering, something happened I didn't expect. People showed up. Not protesters, not news crews. Neighbors, families, kids. Folks who had lived in silence just like me, thinking they were alone. We started a community defense group. Nothing formal, just porch meetings, coffee mugs, and old maps laid out on barn tables. Ellie set up a wildlife co-op with other vets. And Hank, he became the unofficial mascot of the resistance. We called it the Roaring Ranch. No, not because of the bear, though yeah, that helped, but because our story made noise. It echoed beyond property lines and politics. It said, this land matters, this life matters, and no HOA, no title-snatching snake in a suit is going to erase that. One afternoon, a boy from the local elementary school handed me a crayon drawing. It was of a bear in sunglasses sitting in a lawn chair sipping lemonade. Underneath it, in shaky handwriting, and keep Texas strong. I couldn't even get the words out to thank him. Just knelt down, handed him a jar of our ranch's honey, and nodded. 'Cause that's legacy right there. Not lawsuits. Not headlines. Just doing what's right and letting that ripple farther than you ever imagined. And look, I know someone else will come along. They always do. Another developer, another scheme, another threat dressed up in legalese and real estate smiles. But this ranch, this land, it remembers. So do I. And so does Hank. And now, so do you. So if you're out there, fighting your own HOA war, holding your ground, wondering if anyone sees you, we do. We hear you. And just like the old barn sign we nailed up out front now says, this land roars back. If this story moved you, share it, like it, drop your city in the comments. And if you're fighting your own silent battle, know this, you're not fighting alone anymore. Thanks for riding with us. Until next time, stay standing, stay stubborn, and stay free.